welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. It's the afternoon of Friday, the 13th of November, 2015. And although that may not sound too auspicious, I think it is an auspicious day. And the reason for this is that ISIS is in big trouble. ISIS is under heavy attack on many fronts. The destruction of ISIS, it seems to me, to any reasonable observer with some military history background, which I guess I have, it is now within sight. The destruction of ISIS within sight, if a decent level of military leadership can be maintained. And of course, the timing of this is not a coincidence. You'll remember that all during August and September, we campaigned implacably for the ouster of ISIS czar Allen, the number one saboteur, the number one subversive, the Benedict Arnold in our military command. And of course, his string puller, the infamous General David Petraeus, right? A dishonored and cashiered general, a felon in the Pentagon and at the top of the CIA. An amazing situation. Anyway, that Petraeus-Allen clique had succeeded in totally sabotaging any reasonable efforts to crush the Islamic State, and they were able to do that for a whole year, from August of 2014 until the end of September 2015. And then our campaign, the Tax Wall Street Party campaign to smash Allen in particular, get him fired, get him out, succeeded in bearing fruit. Now, we couldn't have done that by ourselves in a million years, but there were other forces, clearly. We're not sure exactly even who they were. Maybe eventually when the memoirs come out, we'll know who was reading what at the time. But we can catalyze things. In other words, we can create the conditions where a convergence of pre-existing forces is feasible. And I think that's actually what we've done. So here's the big news. The town of Sinjar in northwestern Iraq, and this is the town which has the large group of Yazidis, the Yazidis being this special ethnic minority. After 24 hours of an offensive, Sinjar has been liberated. The town of Sinjar has been seized out of the bloody hands of the ISIS butchers. And that ought to be good news for anybody who's interested in human civilization, having some kind of a perspective in this our time. This offensive began yesterday. It began in the late hours of Veterans Day, November 11th, Armistice Day in some countries, right? The end of World War I on the Western Front in 1918, November 11th, 1918 at 11 o'clock in the morning, 11/11/11. That's when the beginning of the end came for ISIS, if we can just keep this pressure up. So it is a coalition which includes the YPG Kurds, the Syrian Kurds. It includes the PKK Kurds, and it includes the Peshmerga being the army of the Kurdish province, right? Maybe state in the American state sense. The province there in northern Iraq. I think the capital is Erbil. And that, of course, is the problematic one, because that is the Barzani and Talibani entity, which has emerged as a result of the 2003 Iraq War. But anyway, all these forces together, YPG, PKK, Peshmerga, the Yazidis have emphatically joined in to liberate their own territory. The Iraqi army, no, but the Iraqi army has its own contribution. The Iraqi army is besieging the town of Ramadi, a little bit further south. So if the Iraqi army is about to envelop Ramadi and put in a formal siege, that will mean it's only a question of time until Ramadi falls. In other words, is liberated. The ISIS butchers kicked out of there also. Now, this began yesterday. The other big story, of course, is the U.S. is providing air cover. Allen was out on the 23rd of October. He was replaced by Brett McGurk, the raunchy diplomat that we've read so much about. You can find him in our daily briefing. Take a look at McGurk, and you'll see some interesting vignettes from his personal life. But McGurk is now in, and McGurk, I guess he can only be a lesser evil when it comes to comparison with Allen. So from October 23rd, when Allen is finally out, the promise had been made in the last week of September. So it took almost 1 month to get him out. And then we get the offensive beginning on the 11th of November. So it took a couple of weeks. But as soon as you get Allen out, ISIS begins to lose. As long as you've got Allen in there, ISIS is winning, at least in terms of the public relations. So Allen, the kiss of death, and now he's out. So this began the other morning, and we've got B-1 bombers of the U.S. involved. We haven't heard anything about B-1 bombers, right? It's a valid tool. And these A-10 Warthogs, right, the so-called tank busters, the close support aircraft that have been contributing to the rout of ISIS. So within 24 hours, Sinjar has fallen, and ISIS is out. They are a paper tiger. They're not the junior varsity. No, indeed. They're the interclub. They're the intramural level. So amateurish and inept and bungling are they. And remember, all these commentators telling you that they're invincible, that they're 20 feet tall, that they have 7-league boots, magical powers, all this stuff. All garbage. All hype. So the significance of this strategically is that the town of Sinjar controls, to a certain degree, Highway 47. Highway 47 is one key east-west line of communication. It's a paved highway, and it starts in Mosul over in northern Iraq, and it goes to Sinjar, and then it passes into Syria, crosses the Syrian border, and gets you to Raqqa. So right now, the ISIS terrorist capital in Raqqa has been cut off from what I believe is the largest city they've ever conquered, which is Mosul. Mosul having about 1 million people. Raqqa, I think, somewhat smaller. So what you can see there is a wedge has been driven into the terrorist state, and it's going to fall apart into 2 segments, right? It's like capturing Vicksburg, if you want to compare it to something a little bit closer to home, right? You cut the line of communications from east to west. Now, this is not exactly what I've been campaigning for, right? Let that also be clear. I am saying the most economical, the most elegant, if you want, solution is to close that corridor between Jarablus on the west bank of the Euphrates, close that corridor that stretches approximately 100 kilometers west from Jarablus and reaches then this area of Ephron. Interdict that area, and you've cut the overall ISIS supply line. You can look at any map of the territory controlled by ISIS, and you'll see that it's a broad aorta of supplies that come down from Turkey and through that Jarablus to Ephron corridor, the Jarablus to Ephron gap. That is what should have been interdicted. But this, of course, is a step in the right direction. It's better than nothing, and it can now be used to increase pressure to do what I've been saying. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C., and it's the afternoon, once again, of Friday the 13th of November. So, undeterred by that, we say it's auspicious. The key town of Sinjar in northwest Iraq has fallen within 24 hours to a coalition of YPG Kurds from Syria, PKK Kurds, Peshmerga Kurds, Yazidis, and U.S. air power, the B-1 bomber, the A-10 Warthog, all acquitting themselves very well. And what this shows, of course, is that with the right kind of diplomacy and the right kind of effort, the defeatism and the appeasement of terrorism and the toadying and pandering to terrorism carried out by Allen and the Petraeus clique, this would have been swept aside much earlier. So Allen out on October 23rd, and therefore this event coming now, 2 weeks later. I told you so. This, I think, confirms in spades what I've been telling you about the importance of Allen, right? That nobody else got it, but here we got it, and a number of people have figured it out with our help, which we think is admirable. Right? A lot of people have caught on to what this is. Now, it's this key highway, the East-West Highway, Highway 47, splits the entire terrorist congeries into two parts. Mosul on one side, Raqqa on the other. The basic idea is that ISIS is too weak to hold on to both sides. So they're going to have to give up Mosul or Raqqa. They should decide they are terrorists and they should be defeated. So we have to be implacable. Keep up the pressure. Don't be diverted. And I also repeat the invitation. That corridor between Jarablus on the Euphrates and Efren has got to be closed, interdicted, blocked. The supply lines there cut. It is certainly interesting that we've heard about supply lines for ISIS. We've heard more of that in the past 48 hours than we've heard in the past year before that, because obviously ISIS, of course, they are, invincible, and they don't need supply lines. They do it all with magic carpets or something like this. No, they don't. They have supply lines just like everybody else. However, what I've been saying up to now about Highway 47 is undercut by the newspaper of record. Yes, indeed, the gray lady. The New York Times now says, aha, ISIS can levitate their trucks. That the U.S. or Iraq or the Kurds, they need to have paved highways so they can drive around with tanks and large trucks and other larger vehicles, but not ISIS, because they say ISIS can go on the non-paved roads that ISIS drives around all the time in these pickup trucks with machine guns on the back, right? Isuzu or Toyota with a machine gun on the back. So ISIS, they say, doesn't need paved roads, right? They're Superman qualities. They live on even in defeat. It's just amazing. So that's what the New York Times says. Take a look at the daily briefing. You can find it at tarpley.net and other locations. And we have some choice quotes from the New York Times in there where they try to argue, no, you can't cut their supply lines that easily because they can use these unpaved roads, right? They go like ships of the desert. I'm sure. Just to keep score, right, concerning what really should be done and still should be done, and which now becomes easier, which is to interdict, to shut that door between Jarablus and Efren. A correspondent on the National Public Radio, Diane Rehm show this morning, the famous International Hour, is a guy called Bowman. He's the NPR Pentagon correspondent. He says that if the Kurds cross the Euphrates, that is considered to be very serious by the wonderful Turks, and that he said something rather cryptic. I'm trying to get the quote. It'll be in the morning briefing on Saturday. The Turkish, he says there's a Turkish brigadier general, a Turkish one-star general, who is doing something interesting in terms of this gap. Now, that sounds like a bunch of hokum, right, from Turkish intelligence, MIT, trying to say, well, everybody says we should close the gap, but guess what? We're already doing it. It's good bureaucratic practice, right? If somebody tells you to do something, the best answer is I'm already doing it. Now, we've also got, this is another interesting thing. Our activity, I'm convinced, is forcing various people out in the open, right? One of these things is the Turks have got to come up with a story about how that gap is being closed, and they're not really, of course, the main supply line for ISIS. here we have a rare cameo appearance by Gnome Chomsky. Gnome is